Hi folks, Bryant here with the Open Range, another episode. This will be episode 11. Last episode 10, I do remember this time what we were talking about. And I was talking about, I was talking about what I have learned so far on in doing this and working on this project, and that I think it's been going well so far, and I'm pretty happy with the results and with people interacting and things like that. So I think it's been a successful project. So we're going to keep going with it. And today's topic is accountability. I think that accountability is extremely important. I think that there are a lot of feelings nowadays that are against accountability, or that make excuses for why people should not be accountable for things. And I think that that's a problem. I think that you need to be held accountable for your actions, for your words, for how you treat people, how you do things. You shouldn't be how can I phrase this? Being held accountable should be a positive and should be for positive and for negative things. I think that, if you're rude for an unnecessary reason, you should be held accountable for that. If you break the law, you should be held accountable for that. If you are in a position of power and you abuse that, you need to be held accountable for that. And that you should not only be held accountable by the people who are observing you and seeing what you're doing and all that, but you should hold yourself accountable for those things. You should always hold yourself accountable for those things primarily. That should be your primary way to make sure, litmus test or whatnot, so that you continue to do things for the best. Thinking about what you're going to do or say before you actually do it or say it, knowing that it may cause some type of reaction in which you will be held accountable for. I think accountability is extremely important, and it's very lacking nowadays. People can get away with a lot of things and a lot of language and a lot of vocabulary and a lot of poor action, and nobody calls them out on it, and nobody says, hey, that's not right, and you shouldn't do that, and this, that, and the other, and if you do something, then or you act away, or you preach, so to speak, about something, maybe what you're considering what I'm doing here, then you should be held accountable for that. If you're gonna talk about doing good things, then you need to be doing good things. If you do something bad, then you need to be able to stand up for the repercussions of that. And I think that it starts by holding yourself accountable to a good set of standards. A lot of this applies towards people in power, because they can very easily cover up or change what they're doing and how they're doing it to make it more suitable for them. And that's not okay. I don't think that's okay. I think it's important that, especially if you're in a position to where you are leading people or supposed to be leading people in any way, that you should do your best to do the best that you can. And you should be, of course, held accountable for all of your actions, for what you do, and that should be a universal thing. I don't think that it applies to only certain people or only certain countries or only certain laws or only certain whatever. I think it applies to everyone universally. That if you do something, whether it's good or bad, there will be a result of that, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's important. And the first thing that should be on your mind when you do something and say something and think and act upon something is that you think about how you can be held accountable for that. So I think that's lacking in today's society. Some people attempt to find scapegoats for the things that they do wrong. No, people are afraid is probably right. They are afraid of the consequences of doing something wrong and making a mistake and admitting to it. And while if you do make a mistake and you admit to it, it may cause problems in your life. You may get fired from your job. You may, something like that might happen. But holding yourself accountable will build you into a better person, and that character will shine through. I think that what goes around comes around type of deal. And if you are an honorable person and you're able to hold yourself accountable for your actions and the things that you do, if you make a mistake at your job, own up to it. Don't let it just float around and cover it up and this and that, and it becomes a bigger problem down the line. I've run into this some in where I work, and I've seen it in other places where if you don't take accountability, the problem, it never gets solved. And more than likely, if you're accountable for it and you admit to the fault and you produce a median to change that and correct it, you will gain from it more than you'll lose. But if you cover it up and you don't do anything about it and you put it on somebody else or what have you, then the problem just compounds and it becomes worse, and it ends up being a worse problem and a bigger problem and a more expensive problem and a more complicated problem in the future. So, short video. It's not a real difficult topic, I don't think. I think that every individual should be accountable for themselves. Groups that are acting as a group should be accountable for themselves as a unit. Individuals within the group need to be held accountable for acting for the best interest of the group. And those of us, or those of you, or those of whoever that are in power, in positions of leadership, in positions of importance, should absolutely be held accountable for everything that they do for themselves and for the people that they represent. Now that doesn't mean that, let's rephrase this next sentence. So if someone takes a hold of their fault and they go through the necessary punishment or what have you, say they do something wrong. If somebody does something wrong and they admit to it and they, man up to it, fess up to it, and they correct it, then that needs to be taken into account as well. You can't, I don't think that you can hold that on someone forever if they have used that to learn and gone through what us as a society has deemed the adequate way to be held accountable for that action. Okay, and so digging up things from people's past, like what happens often, if it's something that has been corrected and taken care of. Now, if it's something in someone's past that has never been addressed or whatever, you're held accountable for everything that you do your entire life. That's just the way it is. And part of that may be ongoing rejection or whatnot. Like, say, for example, if you commit a felony and you are found guilty, you're being held accountable for it, but part of that is maybe difficulty finding a job and things like that, and that's just the way the system works. And I'm not saying that it's a good or a bad system, but that's part of taking the accountability of your actions for doing whatever happened to put you in that position in the first place. Should people be given a second chance and all that? That's a different topic, I think. But I think that it's important that before we get to that point, we as individuals take into account what might happen should we act upon a certain thing and act a certain way and do a certain thing. What are going to be the consequences of that action should we get caught if we're doing something negative. And if we're doing something positive, is it really a positive? Is it good? What happens when we do it? What are we trying to get out of that? Are we doing it for the right reasons and things like that, and all that kind of stuff. But no matter what, the point boils down to being held accountable for your words and for your actions. Stand up for those things. If you feel that it's necessary to talk to another person a certain way, whether it's a good way or a bad way, then when you're confronted about it, you said it, so own up to it, things like that. If you make a mistake, then admit to it, take the punishment for the mistake, take whatever the consequence is for that mistake, learn from it, grow from it, and move forward. If you continually avoid that accountability, then it creates a more and more untrustworthy environment for you and for the people around you and things like that, and it's just a deeper and deeper hole. That's not good. So maintain accountability. It starts with you as an individual. Any group that you participate in, you're a part of their accountability. Hold your friends to a standard of accountability. People in positions of power and leadership and things like that should most certainly be held accountable for everything they do and say, to be sure that they do and say them correctly. If that accountability has been held up, like something happened in the past and they went through the process of so a mistake was made in the past and they go through the process that we as a society have deemed reasonable as far as taking care of that issue and moving on from it, then they have been held accountable for that, and that needs to be kept in mind as well. If you continually punish somebody for something that they've done and they've already corrected that behavior or whatnot, that's not helpful, especially if they are able to admit to what they did and then admit that they went through the process of correcting that and whatnot. Then you hold them accountable for that. Don't hold them accountable for whatever the wrongdoing was if it's been corrected. Now, if it's never been corrected, then that's where accountability will fall in that place. I guess this can be kind of a complicated topic, but it really boils down to the individual being held accountable for everything that you do and say. And in that, if you're holding yourself accountable, then hopefully your thought process will be one of going through what might happen if you do something. If you do something, then what is going to be the response or the reaction to doing that? And that's self accountability. Knowing that if you do something wrong, there could be punishment involved in it. And that if you make a mistake somewhere, that you admit to that, own up to it. That's your mistake to have. Fix it, move on, move forward, and learn from it and be a better person about it. So really, in the grand scheme of things, anything we're going to talk about here really boils down to knowledge and education. And I'm not saying books or streets or anything like that, but knowledge of self, education of self, things like that on many different levels. Being able to understand a consequence to an action and what might happen if you do something, so that you don't walk into a situation unknown and act upon a whim, so to speak. And if you do act upon a whim, if that's your nature, then learn for yourself that those whims you will be held accountable for. And that's fine. I mean, if that's the type of person that you are, then okay, that's the type of person that you are. Just know that whatever you do, that you should be ready to answer for it, whether it's good or bad. I think that's important in today's world. I don't think people do that very much anymore. I think they try to avoid accountability and blame it on somebody else or things like that for fear of reprimand. And I don't think, I think that creates, I think that type of operating creates not a worse person, but there's a better word for that. I think that type of operating, if you operate in a way in which you are not held accountable, or you try to avoid being held accountable, that is a bigger problem than the mistake that you actually make, because it'll probably lead to a habit of avoiding that, avoiding the responsibility of whatever you're doing or not doing or what have you. Whereas if you take the corrective action, knowing that you caused a problem or created a problem or are a problem, then all in all, yeah, it'll be bad for a little while. There's going to be consequences. That's what happens when you get into trouble and do something wrong. There are consequences. But you'll probably grow from that into a better person, and it'll be better for you and better for the people around you. So there's lots of opportunity there. I don't think you can ever go wrong with being accountable for what you do and what you say. I don't think you can ever go wrong with that. Even if it is something detrimental, it's always best to own it and learn from it and move forward. Forward and up, that's the way to go. So yeah, that's today's talk. I'd like to see what y'all have to say about that, about accountability. I was a little scattered there. I didn't really take any notes for that one. Just something that I've been thinking about and noticing that people try to get away with a lot of things that they shouldn't, and that a lot of people avoid the responsibility of the mistake. And that, as uncomfortable as it makes you, own it. Own your mistake, learn from it, don't do it again, and keep going forward. It'll make you a better person. It'll make you a more valuable person in your workplace and in other workplaces and things like that. Hopefully you are able to learn from those mistakes and not continually make them. If not, you need to be accountable for that too, not being able to learn from that and use that as something, as knowledge to further yourself and benefit yourself. Not everybody's made to do everything, and that's okay. There are a lot of things to do and say and be and try and this and that, and they're not all made for everybody. So yeah, be accountable. Stand up. Be accountable for yourself first. Be accountable for groups and things that you're involved in. If you're a leader or a politician or someone in a place of power, someone that people look up to and follow and listen to, be accountable for everything that you do there. If you're in the public light, there are more people looking at you, and your accountability will spread. If people see that you are taking accountability for yourself, they will probably follow and take accountability for themselves, and that's nothing but positive. So let's do that. Be better people. don't be a dick, and we'll catch you on the next one.